When we go back a little bit to talk about some of the rain gardens, I think almost all of them that I've seen you use various sedges, the calyxes. Are
Yeah.
there any that are particularly well adapted, or that I know you use a number of natives, but in general, calyxes I find are really useful for all kinds of gardenings. Which ones work in bioswales and rain gardens?
So most of them work. We use Carex progressiva. There's a difference. There's clumping or bunching sedges, and then there's running. So depending on the turbidity or the volume of water, if it's coming in really fast and it's going to disturb the soil, we don't like to use a lot of rock because we want to put plants in so that the plant roots can keep the function going where it absorbs
Sure.
water and infiltrates.
Yeah.
So if you've got a lot of turbidity because the water's coming in really fast, then Carex progressilis or Carex panza would be good because they're runners and they'll kind of fill in an area. But if you don't need that, then we do clumping ones. So Divolsa is a good one. Technexus, a very small, short one. And the largest one I use because it's going to have a larger deep rooting is Carex oppressus. That one's a little hard to find. I know that I bought it before from Joe O'Connell at the Australian nursery. Native Son started growing it for a while. They don't have a current crop that I've seen, but that one's a beautiful tall one. And then the
Carex spissa.
That's the one that's a little bit gray in that photo.
But
That's San Diego sedge, and that'll get about 5 to 6 feet.
Yeah.
Explain a little more though about the fact that these concepts, rain gardens, are designed to be wet in the winter. And you said even at the base level, certain plants are expected to be almost like bog plants.
Yes.
So how does one plan for that, knowing it's going to be quite dry in the summer? And Tom mentioned earlier about some types of irrigation where you actually do irrigate through a bioswale, but for most people, the concept of having plants that are meant to be wet and boggy and then go totally dry in the summer is a little hard to grasp. So how do you decide which plants can adapt to that severe change?
Well, you have to know that there are certain plants that can go both wet and dry. That's the first step. Even Anemopsis californica, which is actually a bog plant, can grow in standing water. It can also go dry. It'll go dormant, but it will come back. And that's typical of Carex divulsa and some of the other ones that if you don't water it during the summertime, it will turn brown and go dormant. But then as soon as the rains come back, it'll come back. And the advantage, though, from a gardening standpoint, if it needs to be green all year round, you can put drip irrigation in the swale like we've done here, and irrigate it during the summer, and then they'll stay green all year round. Juncus is another one. The elk blue, the rushes, they can also sit in water and dry out during the summertime. They're just adapted to these very extreme conditions.
This is a really good example, this photo, of how we design for that golden color and to always have something green. If you notice the pathway, on both sides of the pathway, the taller grass is Carex oppressus, but the shorter one is some Sizzleria. So Sizzleria is going to stay green all the time. And the center, see the ones that are very limey green? Those are the Muhlenbergias or the warm season grasses in the Boutelouis that have been cut back. So they've been cut back, but you still have the edges that are still green on both sides of the path. So on the very right-hand side is the Sizzleria John Greenlee. You see that pathway, or where you're sitting, if you're sitting on the rocks in the Oak Cove up there, you're seeing green in front of you. And we limited the brown or gold to just rivers running through the garden so that it didn't seem so wild, and it was a little bit more manicured in this kind of upscale neighborhood. So it was more acceptable to get to them. In fact, the homeowner was walking through the garden, and I remember saying, we have to make this as acceptable as possible. So we have to be constrained with how wild we get it. And the homeowner, we were doing a night light check, and he goes, I didn't really understand what I was going to get, but it's just so beautiful. It's so constrained, but yet wild. And he used the same terminology as when we were designing the garden. And it was like, wow.
Well, that's a win-win. That's
Yeah,
one.
that was a win-win. Well, these guys,
Yeah.
they're just the
Yeah.
best, just the best people to work with. They were lovely to work with and continue to be, because we're developing more down on the slope. And it takes a while when you're doing naturalistic planting design like this, it takes a while to establish plants. The slope is always hard to establish.
It's always gratifying to
That one.
have people see the plants that can work within this naturalistic design and be satisfying to them. I think personally, I love grasses, as you know. So seeing where you mix different types of grasses, where they're carex or bunch grasses or whatever, they're all grass-like, but they're not typically thought of as very showy plants. But when you can have them in different seasons, the warm seasons ones allowing them to flower, the cool season ones flower and then cut back, and maybe they still have some green. That rhythm is personally satisfying. I'm just gratified to know that you're seeing clients appreciate that and wanting more of it.
The other thing that we do is we use a lot of species, and in trying to make everything blend, we use plants that are what I call integrators. And this short salvia is a gerrymander, a salvia germander, and it is one of the integrators. So, and it's a very economical. You can get this sometimes in quarts. If I can get it in quarts, I'll get it in quarts because it's a very fast grower. But it's only like a 2 to 3, and it's got the blue flower. And then there's a cultivar named Marine Blue that is even bluer. And in this particular garden, I think I used 400 of these to put some of this in every. Well, it's 25,000 square feet, so it seems like a lot, but not when you think about the number of square footage that was involved. And we use this in every single section of the garden, so that there was that consistent blue pattern that was running. And we also used it because it is economical. You can get it as a quart, that we use it as a filler for the longer growing, the ones that take longer. So there's a lot of manzanitas that are very slow growing. So we put a lot of these salvias in, and then we've been taking them out as the manzanitas have taken up their space.